It was to be like the other 10 previous flights to America. However, on this journey, and especially during its end, everything went terribly wrong. This is the story of the disastrous flight of the German airship Hindenburg in 1937, landing Lakehurst, New Jersey, the United States.
Humanity and all the fans been meeting around here.
At the beginning of the history of airships, we saw some very special designs and types before a kind of standard became common. Of the German airships, the foundation was finally laid by Ferdinand von Zeppelin in the first years of the 20th century. In 1908, he founded a company called Luftschiffbau Zeppelin, the Zeppelin Company. Zeppelin was a German pioneer of airships, and his name became synonymous with the rigid airships that his company mainly designed and manufactured. Until the 1930s, Zeppelin airships were dominant in long-distance flights. Still, to better understand his long-term work in the field of aviation and how von Zeppelin's interest in airships began, we need to go much further back in time to the American Civil War. There, a young German observer, Ferdinand von Zeppelin, saw the Union Army Balloon Corps. In the Civil War, the aeronautical pioneers carried out aerial reconnaissance and observation of the terrain from the air. From the ground, the aeronautics were assisted by a crew that held and moved the balloon by ropes. The experience made an impression on the young Prussian soldier and eventually led Ferdinand von Zeppelin to study aviation and finally to open his own airship factory more than 40 years later. However, it was still some time before Zeppelin's thoughts and ideas would change the history of aviation. In 1887, he expressed concern that Germany was falling behind in the development of airships, comparing it to neighboring France and, in particular, to the French airship La France, which was the world's first fully steerable airship and the first to complete a full round-trip flight and land back to its starting point. In 1890, Zeppelin decided to leave the army and from that moment on, devote all his attention to airships and their development. The beginning of a new career was not without setbacks. Namely, Zeppelin almost gave up hope when he realized that in his calculations and plans, he had not taken air resistance into account enough. In addition, there were problems with the mechanization of airship propulsion, and Zeppelin held strict discussions with the engine manufacturer and continued to emphasize the importance of lighter motors, that airships would have a future in the military, and that France was still ahead of Germany in this development. Coincidentally, at the same time as Zeppelin's aviation revolutionizing ideas, the world was experiencing a period of intense industrial growth of all sectors. New inventions were born that had previously only been dreamed of. Inventions made everyday life easier and faster. It was an era when large national and later multinational companies were born, and they industrialized their production lines so that manufactured goods could be produced faster, and the company profits would be as large as possible. During this upheaval, the rights of individuals were often sidelined, and the well-being of the working class was little cared for. It soon led to the birth of trade unions that supported the disadvantaged, but that's another story. However, in accordance with this social order, von Zeppelin also began to invest and put effort to build his company, which would become perhaps the world's most famous manufacturer of airships. It was now 1898. For 8 years already, von Zeppelin had focused solely on the design and creation of rigid airships. In the same year, he had also founded his first airship company and started building the airship LZ-1, Luftschiff Zeppelin 1. The company was successful in its endeavor, and the first experimental rigid-frame airship was completed in 1900. The airship was built in a floating shed. Zeppelin believed that water would be a safer landing pad for airships than ground. It made its first flight on July 2, 1900 at Lake Constance, near Friedrichshafen in southern Germany. During this first flight, LZ-1 reached altitude of 410 meters. The flight distance was 6.1 kilometers, and it took around 17 minutes. Due to technical problems, the flight had to be interrupted. Repairs took several months, but in October, the airship flew again. The Zeppelin airship had potential. It was faster than the French airships. However, even that was not enough to attract investors. As the funds earmarked for the project were exhausted, von Zeppelin had to scrap his airship, sold it, as well as his company. Still, he continued persistently with the development work. The first Zeppelin airship was very advanced in its technical features considering the era. The continuation of the development work ensured that Germany became a great power also in producing airships. Even before the First World War, Zeppelin produced several new airships, and in 1908, Luftschiffbau Zeppelin was opened, a company that was the leading designer and manufacturer of airships in the world. As von Zeppelin had predicted, the military became interested in using airships in warfare. In the World War I, however, their utilization was probably different than previously assumed. From 1915, Germany began to use airships in its strategic bombing campaign against Britain. At first, it seemed that Zeppelin raids carried out at night could cause fear and serious damage to civilians and also to production facilities. However, it quickly became clear that the clumsy and slow airships could not defend against aircraft. The bombardment efficiency was also inaccurate because there were no sights, but dropping bombs was carried out by naked eye. In addition, the easily flammable hydrogen posed a constant threat to airship crews. Zeppelin raids had no effect whatsoever on the outcome of the war. On the contrary, they consumed Germany's own military resources. Because the airships were extremely expensive to manufacture, they consumed an endless amount of work hours and materials. Zeppelins proved to be a disappointment in aerial warfare. In addition, Luftschiffbau Zeppelin suffered another major loss. Its founder, Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, died during the war in 1917. The company was now facing a new era. The war was over and there was a period of peace. It was a good fit for the new manager. He was Hugo Eckener. Eckener had always, in contrast to his predecessor, believed that airships were intended for passenger flights rather than as instruments of war. Eckener's starting point, the most important goal, was to pilot the company and design airships that would be capable of long-distance travel, intercontinental flights. During Eckener's era, Luftschiffbau Zeppelin briefly lived its most glorious time, and the company was among the most famous ones in the world. At the height of success, no one could have guessed how quickly everything would one day come to an end. Right from the start, Eckener and Luftschiffbau Zeppelin faced quite a few challenges. Germany had signed the Treaty of Versailles. It pretty much dictated all the room for maneuver that post-war Germany had. The harsh peace conditions also affected the production of airships. It limited it and, on top of that, completely banned the construction of certain types of airships, precisely those intended for intercontinental travel. In addition, as war reparations, Germany had to hand over a significant part of its airships for the Allied powers. Due to the Versailles peace terms, Luftschiffbau Zeppelin had to temporarily suspend all design work regarding large airships. However, Eckener and the company's management did not give up hope. It was Eckener's luck, because the solution to the problems was soon coming from a surprising direction. The United States and its Navy were also interested in rigid-framed airships. The airship USS Shenandoah had been built at the naval station in Lakehurst in 1923. However, it was destroyed while flying in Squaw Line in 1925. There were also other major accidents in the development of American airships. This turned out to be lucky for the Luftschiffbau Zeppelin. Using his negotiation skills, Eckener secured a deal in which it was agreed that the Zeppelin company would build the airship USS Los Angeles in cooperation with the American Goodyear. In 1924, the USS Los Angeles was completed, and Eckener commanded it on a transatlantic flight from Germany to the United States. The successful ocean crossing generated an enthusiastic reaction among Americans, and Eckener received an invitation to the White House, hosted by President Calvin Coolidge. This was the beginning of a real but short golden age for Eckener and the Zeppelins. The company was already preparing for its next huge project. However, it took a few more years for the financing of the project to be in order and the implementation on a credible basis. LZ-127, better known as Graf Zeppelin. It was the largest airship in the world when it was completed, and it was built at the Luftschiffbau Zeppelin Works in Friedrichshafen between 1926 and 1928. The Zeppelin also went down in history as the most profitable airship. Originally, however, that was not the intention. The Graf Zeppelin was designed as a kind of experimental passenger airship type. It was supposed to present future standards in air travel and prepare the way for ever larger Zeppelins. Graf Zeppelin was the first airship to circumnavigate around the world. It flew non-stop over the Pacific Ocean and visited the Arctic regions. As a rule, for 5 years, the Graf Zeppelin operated commercial passenger and mail flights between Germany and Brazil. In total, this airship flew 590 times and accumulated an incredible amount of flight kilometers. From the beginning, Luftschiffbau Zeppelin had intended to prioritize South America and especially Brazil as marketing the passenger flights. It was because there was a large German minority living there. Graf Zeppelin's flights to South America became very popular. However, the Graf Zeppelin had been in service only for 1 year when Eckener and company already took the next step in building intercontinental passenger airships and started designing of a larger Zeppelin. It was 1931 when they started building the airship that would be the flagship of the Luftschiffbau Zeppelin airships. It was LZ-129, known better as Hindenburg, named after Field Marshal and the German President Paul von Hindenburg. LZ-129 was huge, absolutely the giant of the skies, in terms of length, height, and volume, the largest aircraft ever built. During the 1930s, it was widely believed airships like Hindenburg would be the future of air travel. Wherever the Hindenburg traveled, it was always the object of special attention. This huge airship attracted people. Newspapers, news agencies, and film photographers and cameramen were also always present. The Zeppelin could hold more than 100 people, crew members and passengers. The Hindenburg was also modern, of course. It represented the best technical development available. Attention was also paid to the comfort of the passengers. The flight from Europe to America took several days, and the company wanted people to feel as entertained and comfortable as possible. Eckener and the management firmly believed that aircraft like the Hindenburg were the future standard for passenger air transport, and the Luftschiffbau Zeppelin really developed its methods in that direction. Unluckily, the end was already in the horizon. The Hindenburg's last flight left Frankfurt, Germany for Lakehurst, USA on May 3, 1937. Over the Atlantic, it encountered strong headwinds, which significantly slowed down the planned flight time. Arriving on the east coast of the United States, the Hindenburg had to dodge a thunderstorm front that further delayed the flight. On the evening of the 6th of May, it finally approached Lakehurst and set out to attempt a landing, which was very fatal to it. Radio station VLS from Chicago had sent journalist Herbert Morrison and cameraman Charlie Nelson to Lakehurst. They were supposed to document and cover the Hindenburg's arrival. The men witnessed one of the most tragic airship accidents on the spot.
It's starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. Get it started, get it started. It's fighting, and it's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh, my, get out of the way, please. It's burning, bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between it. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's like 400 or 500 feet into the sky, and it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the flame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it. I told you, I can't even talk to people. His friends are on there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. Honest, it's just laying there, a massive smoking wreckage. And everybody can't hardly breathe and talk and screaming. Lady, I'm sorry. Honestly, I can hardly breathe. I'm going to step inside while I cannot see it. Charlie, that's terrible. Listen, folks, I'm going to have to stop for a minute because I've lost the voice. This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed.
Due to the explosions, the extent of the fire, the complete destruction of the airship Hindenburg, and the generally shocking sight of the entire accident site, it is difficult to understand how people managed to survive the disaster. However, 62 crew members and passengers survived while 36 people lost their lives. Among the deaths, there was one ground fatality. The first German political figure to reach the crash site and visit the injured in the hospital was the German ambassador to the United States, Hans Luther. However, he refused to take any position on the accident or the reasons that led to it. The Hindenburg disaster is the first live-covered catastrophe globally. Previously, taking airships into account in the media had been good for the companies that owned them. Now, the publicity suddenly turned in the opposite direction. As a result of the accident, the confidence in Zeppelins as safe passenger aircraft was shattered. At the same time, it marked the end of the era of airships. The cause of the accident has never been proven with certainty, neither the source of the fire. One of the most supported theories is a combination of a gas leak and atmospheric static conditions on the airship. According to the theory, while flying in turbulent conditions in the storms, Hindenburg accumulated a high static charge on board. It is also assumed that there was a hydrogen gas leak inside the airship. An explosion occurred when both of them reacted to each other. What is certain is that what Ferdinand von Zeppelin started nearly 50 years earlier came to an end as a result of the events of one day. You have been listening and watching a video of the 1937 Hindenburg disaster, the rise and fall of the Zeppelins. Thank you and see you in the next one.